So as you can see here, I've got the Taranis M7 gimbal upgrades for the Taranis QX7 transmitter. I bought these because they were fairly inexpensive and they looked nice, and they do have some advantages. I think they may not have as many advantages as a lot of people think they do, but today we're going to take a look and we're going to find out. We're going to talk about what is different between the upgraded M7, also the M9 for the Taranis 9, is it? The other one, the one with the larger screen. I looked online and these gimbals look exactly the same. The only difference is the mounting of them, I'm fairly certain. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a little bit of theory regarding what's in these versus what's in those. And then I want to look really closely at the physical construction of this. I'm going to take one of these out, look at the physical construction, see if there's any actual difference between the two other than this one looking a little bit nicer. Then we'll talk about the sensors that are in these versus the sensors that are in those, what the advantages could be and what the advantages probably aren't. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around. Okay, so the two types of sensors we're going to be dealing with are potentiometers and Hall effect sensors. So a potentiometer is just a voltage divider. Basically you've got a voltage here, say 5 volts, ground on this side, and then you put some resistance on this side, some resistance on this side, whatever it is, whatever value of resistance we have on either side, and then you have a tap in the middle, and this would be your output. If you have 5 volts here and this resistance are the same, what you're going to get in this middle area right here in between them is 2.5 volts. Okay. All a potentiometer does is it has a physical track of resistance material, and this is on a wiper that physically moves back and forth through this material, either decreasing this side resistance and increasing this side, or increasing this side and decreasing this side, basically meaning that as you move your stick on the gimbal, the voltage will increase or decrease on this output generally between whatever the input is and 0 volts. Hall effect sensor, basically you've got the same 5 volts will be your input. You have the ground, and then you have a magic box here that essentially reacts to a magnetic field and then outputs a voltage, an output voltage. So this would be the output. So with the Hall effect sensor, you have a magnet that can be passed further away or closer to the sensor, and depending on that distance, it will output a different voltage here on the output. So in this case, the Hall effect sensor would be mounted in the gimbal, and the magnet would be attached to the stick, and this would move closer or further away, and that's how you would basically get the same thing as the output over here. The difference is with the potentiometer, you have a physical contact with this wiper. The Hall effect sensor is a contactless system, so there's never any physical wear that occurs with a Hall effect sensor, unlike with a potentiometer. So that's the basics of that. So let's go ahead and look at the gimbals themselves, and we'll see how they compare and contrast. Okay, let's take a look at these. First of all, this plastic ring that goes on here, on the original one, that comes off, and it'll be switched over to this one, which is a little bit of a bummer to me. I wish that they had provided a cooler looking surround for this as opposed to the original plastic ring, but it is what it is. Alright, second of all, you can see this is a plastic surround here. This is an aluminum plate. This is also aluminum. This is plastic. Clearly this one looks much cooler than this one does, The sticks themselves are both some sort of metal. This one looks a little bit nicer. The teeth, yeah, these are a little bitier. That's all fine. Feel, to me, they feel almost exactly the same. The bounce to center, very, very similar. And I think the reason that is if you look at the bottom of these, they are built quite differently. However, they're not really that different. The way that these work is, you can see as I push left and right, or left, either way, on here, this little metal pin, steel, I'm assuming pin, here and here pushes down on a spring-loaded, plastic-coated lever. And you can see that they're offset because the way that the lever is offset, they have to be, otherwise they would have a different feeling, a different amount of resistance when you push down on them. So that's basically that one, and it's essentially the same for this one as well. Now, on here, on the upgraded one, you can see that the levers are turned over. However, it's still a steel pin pushing on some sort of plastic, I'm guessing nylon coated metal lever like this. And this, I'm sure this is very standard, but they're basically the same setup as far as how that feels. Now, you've got, in the originals, you've got ball bearings. You can see there, those are some sort of either sealed or shielded ball bearings. This one, it's kind of harder to see, but if you look down in there, this also has ball bearings. I'm not going to go so far as to take these apart to compare the ball bearings. I get the feeling that they're going to be exactly the same. I don't think that they would change the bearings. I mean, bearings, in this case, as long as they feel smooth and they're relatively well sealed, I don't think you're going to feel much of a difference. So, as far as how these are going to feel, these might feel better to you mentally, but physically, I don't think there's going to be very much difference in them. They feel almost exactly the same to me. Like I said, the bite on the top of this stick is a little bit nicer than the bite on the top of this stick. Other than that, I don't really think there's that much difference. Okay, so let's talk about the sensors. This green circuit board here, this is the original stick. This green circuit board here is what's going to be housing the potentiometer that we talked about earlier. So as this stick moves, let me turn this around so you can see, down in here, as this stick moves left and right, it'll be attached to the wiper of the potentiometer, and you can see you've got the 3 wires that we were talking about, a ground, a positive, I'm assuming 5 volts, and then a signal, which should be the green, or output. As this moves back and forth, it will move the wiper, and yada yada yada. Same, looks good. Another one's right here. Same basic situation. On this one, I'm not entirely certain how they're doing it, but in here you can see the circuit board's at a different angle, and there'll be a Hall effect sensor here, and then in there will be a magnet either moving closer and further away, or it'll be on an offset and it'll be moving up and down like this. Same on this side. So let's talk about the difference between these practically. I've seen a lot of people say that the Hall effect sensor is going to give you a higher resolution for your control, finer control, more accurate control. That may be the case on this stick. However, what a lot of people don't think about is that the servo itself, it has to track where its position is in the world, and it uses a potentiometer to do that. And because it uses a potentiometer to do that, it essentially negates any kind of gains in accuracy you're going to have here, because with a potentiometer on the other end telling the servo where it is, where its position is, that's the resolution that will now be the limit to how fine of a resolution control you can have. Other things are, servos are pretty darn accurate to begin with, and a servo sitting by itself is one thing, but then you also have to think about all of the slop in the servo to the servo horn to the linkage to the control surface, the hinge in the control surface, etc., etc. If there's any slop in any of those things, that's going to way overthrow any kind of accuracy gains that you would get by, and I'm talking about, in normal circumstances. Obviously, I'm sure you could have very, very, very expensive setups where the controls will be very, very tight, but even then, you're talking tiny, tiny bits of slop causing a much more great difference than you would have between a Hall effect sensor and a wiper from a potentiometer. Now, here's where I think the real advantage will come in. This is a cheap radio, which leads me to believe that these are cheap potentiometers and these are cheap Hall effect sensors. The nice thing is, a cheap potentiometer will probably wear out fairly quickly. Now, not super quick. I'm sure they have it designed to where it'll last a good long while, but over time, with all this, minute movement back and forth, you're going to get wear in these, and they may end up losing some accuracy over time. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, but that could be an advantage to these Hall effect sensors, because with the Hall effect sensors, since they are completely contactless, as long as they work in the beginning and they don't suffer an internal failure, they're going to keep working. So that's basically the comparison between these two. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the transmitter, and we'll kind of take a look and see how they look compared to each other sitting in the transmitter, and then I'm going to wrap this up with some final thoughts. Okay, so I've got the new one installed over here and the original one over here. I went ahead and took put the tension back on this one so they would feel exactly the same, and closing my eyes and using these, I'm not feeling any difference. They bounce almost exactly the same, and I'm not surprised. I mean, they're basically the exact same mechanism. So, should you buy the upgrade for your Taranis transmitter? Should you buy the M7 or the M9 Gimbals? It depends. I got these fairly inexpensively. I think it was like $40 for both of them. They look nice. The Hall effect sensors have the potential to last longer. However, I think they feel almost identical. They both have full ball bearings. They both use basically the exact same mechanism for their tensioning. And I don't think there's that much difference. So, should you buy them? Maybe. If you like the look and you like the thought of potentially having a better reliability on the sensors, then sure. Otherwise, I would stick with the originals. Maybe if they start to give you trouble, then as opposed to replacing them with another set of the originals, you could upgrade. Other than that, I think the original gimbals are perfectly adequate. Alright guys, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm of course going to put the other upgraded one in here because I think they look sexy as hell. And any questions, let me know. And thanks for watching. Please comment, like, or dislike, and subscribe. Thank you.